what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Foot Candle Films. Film news and reviews from two guys who really like movies.
This episode is brought to you by the Foot Candle Film Society. For a schedule of upcoming screenings and membership information, visit the Society's website at www.footcandle.org.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Foot Candle Films here on the Mesh.tv podcast network. My name is Alan Jackson. With me is Chris Fry. We are with the Foot Candle Film Society and the annual Foot Candle Film Festival. Chris, how's it going?
It's going well. I am looking forward to, we are delving into a new way of putting out our podcast. So I'm looking forward to the updated format, new and improved.
Yeah, we're trying up a little change of format here. We used to get together and we'd review a couple films at a time and pack in a lot of other things. But those were also only coming out twice a month. So Now we're like, well, the clamoring we got from people saying, look, I got to have my fix of Foot Candle discussion every week.
They miss us.
We hear you.
Yeah.
We hear you. So what we're doing is we're just going to focus every episode on one film that we're going to review, but we're going to have stuff coming out every week because of that. So that's, I think, going to be nice. And still the same number of films we're reviewing in a month and the same kind of content, just spread out over 4 weeks instead of every 2 weeks. So people can kind of count on it on a weekly basis, knowing you're going to get your little fix of the glorious voices of me and Chris Fry here talking about movies with you.
Right.
But so let's go ahead and jump right into what we're going to do for this week. So this week's episode, we are talking about the latest animated sensation chronicling the life of a certain wall crawler named Spider-Man. This one is Spider-Man: Across the Spider-Verse. We're going to discuss that film, our review of that film. And then we'll also dig into a little bit of movie news this week. We got a couple of news items I wanted to share with you, Chris, about some interesting developments in the film world. Both of these having to do with directors that I think are of interest to discuss and at least explore what they're working on now. So that's what we'll do during our news section. So, Chris, are you ready to jump right into our review of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, here we go.
My name is Miles Morales. I'm Brooklyn's one and only Spider-Man. And things are going great.
Oh, yeah. You were supposed to be here at 5.
All right, whatever.
Whatever?
Wow.
Whatever?
So are you like a cow or a Dalmatian?
I am the Spot.
Miles Morales, voiced by Shameik Moore, returns for the next chapter of the Oscar-winning Spider-Verse saga, an epic adventure that will transport Brooklyn's full-time, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man across the multiverse to join forces with Gwen Stacy, who's voiced by Haley Steinfeld, and a new team of Spider People to face off with a villain more powerful than anything they have ever encountered. Alan, considering that premise and the fact that we have had multiverse and quantum realms, I guess I should say, all these different takes on how the universe is put together. We've already seen Into the Spider-Verse, which had this. How did this follow-up going across the Spider-Verse work for you? Did you find it entertaining or did you find it exhausting?
I found it entertaining.
Okay.
So just to go ahead and kind of button up your first question there. Surprisingly, I did not find it exhausting. I found Into the Spider-Verse, as much as I did appreciate that film and I enjoyed it and it's a great film, I did find it exhausting. I found it overwhelming. I found it kind of tough for me to really completely enjoy because I just felt like I felt bombarded throughout that first film. Now, this film, you would think a sequel, longer running time and more characters, that it would actually be more overwhelming for someone like me. It actually wasn't. I actually felt like this was, I don't know, maybe my brain was already kind of rewired to appreciate this film now after being kind of exposed to the first one. But I actually found this to be very enjoyable. I did enjoy it. I'm going to say I liked it better than Into the Spider-Verse, but that's just because I still am wrestling with my feelings on that first movie. I think as I talked about Into the Spider-Verse, the first one, during our review, I made mention about how this is not the type of film or story that I like for this character to be involved in. We've had a lot of Spider-Man movies over the years. I am a big Spider-Man fan. I've, read the comics since I was a kid. I'm in deep in that world. This whole Spider-Verse thing is not my cup of tea. Okay. I'm just not a fan of it. Not a fan of the whole multiple worlds and multiple incarnations of the same character. So that's why
you're more of a one at a time Spider-Man.
Yeah, I'm more of a traditional Spider-Man guy.
Gotcha.
I'm like, give me a guy who's just swinging around Queens and Brooklyn and Queens and helping save people and fighting crazy looking bad guys. That's it. I'm good. I'm good with that. So the whole Spider-Verse thing, I always thought was very exhausting. I didn't like it in the comics back when I was reading it. Don't like it in the movies as much. However, I will say, I think this movie won me over on it. I was able to kind of let go and appreciate the film, the story it was trying to tell for what it was. And it actually worked for me. But look, all this would be a moot point if it wasn't for the craftsmanship involved in making this film. Okay. When you just described that synopsis of the film, if I had not seen any visuals from this film, if I hadn't heard any of the voice acting, if I hadn't heard seen any of the artistry done in making this film, I would have said, oh my God, that sounds horrible. So I do not want to see this movie.
Okay.
But,
especially after having seen the first one.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But seeing and knowing what all is involved to make this film such an experience that it is, it's the animation. It is the voice acting, which I think is very good. It is the storytelling devices. I think even amidst the fact that it's a giant animated, eclectic animation film, there's some really great storytelling devices being used throughout the film to really carry the story and make it work. So there's just a lot of artistry involved in making this film work. And I appreciated it a lot more than I think I ever did before with this particular film. I do have some issues we can get to in a little bit, but overall I'm going to say I'm very positive on the film. I liked it. I'm probably in the minority of saying that I liked it a little more than the first one, but I did enjoy it with a couple of big misgivings that I'll discuss in a little bit. Chris, I want to hear your thoughts today. What did you think of Across the Spider-Verse?
Got you. So I think going into this film was excited just because I really liked the first one. Mm-hmm. I know who Spider-Man is, but I didn't have any of the qualms about the whole Spider-Verse.
You were okay
thing.
going in kind of for a fresh new take on how this whole character was being defined.
Right. And back when this happened, I wasn't kind of beleaguered by multiverse or multiple possibilities and all that kind. I wasn't worn out by that. Now I kind of am. However, this film worked for me. And I think a lot of it just has to do with, like you're saying, the innovative style, and the voice works really good. And I feel like what I was kind of impressed by too is, yes, a lot of people threw the words groundbreaking and all that at the one that won the Oscar. This one comes out, and I'm kind of expecting it more or less to be, kind of the same type thing, a little different, but I was impressed with how much further they even tried to take the film. They were like, okay, and now we're going to try to go a step further. When they didn't really need to, they could have just kind of sat back and relaxed and just kind of done the same thing again, but they didn't. I found it, whereas I don't think I was so excited by the first one. This one, I kind of knew what I was getting into, but it did overwhelm me at times, but it never, once after the first, let's say this, as you mentioned, this film is 2 hours and 20 minutes long. After about the first 30 minutes or so, I was like, okay, I'm kind of a little bit more on the film's wavelength.
You've recalibrated your brain
right,
to now be on the movie's wavelength.
Right.
Yeah.
And basically I think it challenges the audience because there's so much flying at you that it's kind of hard to catch everything. But the thing is, you can trust the filmmakers. You don't really have to.
Right.
I think what I look forward to is seeing this film another time and maybe catching some references or some things that make the story, not that it didn't work well, but maybe work even better because I'm able to not be so distracted by everything that's going on.
Yeah.
You
brought up a good point. I think it takes some real skill to have so much thrown at the audience, so much showing up, so much popping in the screen, so many things happening, but by the end of the film, you still have told a story that you can follow. And you're right. You've kind of trained the audience over time to like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, but here's what just to pay attention to. Here's what to focus on. Here's what's important out of this. All the rest is fun. All the rest is there visually to kind of move us forward, but it's not going to impact your enjoyment of the core story we're trying to tell. That's some real skill there, because I've seen it not go that way with other films and other filmmakers. Here, there's just some real talent involved in making these films. I will say that. I think there's just some top to bottom real talent in making a really one of the most artistically talented films that I think we've been able to see in a while. So
I'll say too, something that I think pleasantly surprised me, but it did throw me off a little bit, was going into the film. There's a lot of screen. I would not have expected this. There's a lot of screen time given to Gwen Stacy,
yeah.
And I wasn't expecting that. So much so that she's kind of a co-lead with Miles Morales, and I wasn't expecting that. I mean, she was in the first film, but it was kind of like, I don't want to say sidekick because that does a disservice to her. But in this one, it was like they were equal, and I was really kind of surprised, but thought that was cool. But even I feel like a lot of our listeners may have seen this. It's not spoiling anything, but it kind of, the way the film starts, and then it kind of has a reset, and then focuses on Miles, and that blew me away. I feel like that's pretty daring for something like this to do. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, no, I think this film introduced a lot of new characters, and the fear I had going in, it was just going to be character overload. And I mean, look, there were a lot of characters introduced, but again, done in a way that you kind of got to know which characters you are really there to help move the story forward, and which ones are there just for fun, which ones are there for a laugh, which ones are there to just, visually spice up the screen. And it's all worked at the end of the day. I'll call out, we had a couple new characters involved. Oscar Isaac playing what we all in the comic book world know is Spider-Man 2099. He's Miguel O'Hara here in the movie, which is pretty accurate. He gets to play that as kind of a new character we get. We get Issa Rae playing Jessica Drew, who's a version of Spider-Woman. We got Daniel Kaluuya as Hobie Brown, who's also Spider-Punk in the movie. Again, a lot of characters thrown in addition to the ones you've already mentioned. Haley Steinfeld with Gwen Stacy, Shameik Moore as Miles Morales. We still have the parents, who I want to call them out because I think the acting, I love the performances of the two parents of Miles's parents. Luna Lauren Velez as Rio Morales, and then Brian Tyree Henry as Jeff Morales. I think both just very good.
Oscar nominated Brian Tyree Henry.
That's right. Both just so good. I mean, just their characters just so natural and so just warm. Good parents, good people, good characters. I love it. And then with Jason Schwartzman as the Spot, who, yes, that is actually a character from the comics. Yes, there is a character named the Spot. Yes, he is about as pathetic as he is in the first half of the movie. But interesting, though. Visually, I think it was the right choice to make that the villain because it's so much you can play with that character's power set. Yeah, so good stuff all the way around. Andy Samberg gets to play a character named Ben Reilly, who, for people who are not familiar with the comics, probably don't know who this is. It's the Scarlet Spider, is a version of Spider-Man. You may have seen him in the movie. He's the one that got a little screen time towards the latter half of the film. Following him, always brooding, always kind of posing a very superhero pose on the top of a building. He's got like a red hoodie looking thing on. Anyway, it's a whole long story. You don't want to get me started. We're trying to make these episodes a little shorter, Chris.
Sure,
so I can't
right.
go into the whole history of Ben Reilly. But those of you who are listening, if you know what I'm talking about, hit me up afterwards. We can geek out about it. Okay. So let me tell you a couple things. I do feel like there were some problems with the film.
Okay.
A couple issues I had. Curious to your thoughts on these as well. I understand the idea of sequels and movies that do build on previous movies, meaning if you don't see a previous movie, it's going to be very difficult to kind of absorb and understand a follow-up movie. I get that. That's
Sure.
kind of the nature of sequels. It's the nature of franchises. It's all good. I do think this is a movie it's not really a negative. It's more of a understanding for audience. I think this type of movie, even more so, I don't know how you can truly appreciate it without having prior understanding, prior awareness, and prior knowledge of either both Into the Spider-Verse or just comic superhero tropes in general. I think there's a little bit of that too. I try to put myself in the position of someone who did not see the first Spider-Verse movie.
Oh, I think if you didn't see the first one, you're probably out
and
of
plus,
luck.
maybe really doesn't spend any time with the thoughts of multiverses and all this other stuff. Going into Across the Spider-Verse, I don't know how you really get into this film at all. So I'm just putting it out there more as a warning to people who just think, oh wow, it's a really visually interesting animated film. Yeah, it is. And if you go to watch it for the animation and the visual, you're going to be given a feast for the eyes. I just don't know how to comprehend the story if you don't have some of that prior knowledge behind you. It's not a negative, because I know we're in a world now that we build on episodic storytelling with new franchises and movies.
Sure.
It's just a little bit of a shame that I do feel like there's some segment of the population that just can't go see this movie or shouldn't go see this movie without some prerequisites being checked off. And that's a little tough. It's a little disappointing. The other thing I'll say, the villain, I mentioned Jason Schwartzman as Spot. It's kind of the villain's kind of split into two roles.
So don't. Maybe
I'm not. There's a transition that happens that tries to change the tone of the film for the latter half of the film.
Yeah.
And it's a tough transition for me. I felt like it was it lost a lot of the spirit of the film that I think they had in the first half, which was really having kind of fun with this character. And then they change the character and make it, I don't know. I can't spoil it, but it was a little jarring to me, and I don't feel like it worked.
Well, let me kind of feed off, because I really enjoyed this movie. I have a lot of good things to say about it. It's probably a 4-star on Letterboxd, maybe.
Yeah.
But the things that kind of bothered me a little bit was I was so into the villain of Spot, as you mentioned, voiced by Jason Schwartzman. And it gave a little bit of origin, which I think maybe if you didn't see the film, that would help you. Still, I agree with you. You'd probably be lost. Mm-hmm. But I think things got a little overly complicated with the addition of another, and I'm using air quotes here, villain. But I guess in a film that dabbles with the multiverse, it's kind of to be expected that you can't just... I think a lot of films, sequels, like you think of all the superhero movies, maybe first superhero movie, you have one bad guy. Second superhero movie, you have two bad guys. And they keep piling on and things get a little muddled and lost. With this one, I really feel like they probably could have stuck with Spot, but they kind of made another character come out against Spider-Man. So I don't want to really ruin things.
Right. Okay. Adversary.
Differing opinions, shall we say.
Yeah. Not going to go with a villain.
No. Well, that's so I said air quotes, not,
okay.
but yeah.
Good call. Got it.
So, and I think something that I was not aware of because I forgot, and this isn't spoiling anything because there's been, I think people know that, and this definitely, don't worry, I'm not spoiling anything. But I was really bummed. And I felt like the reason they did kind of the air quote adversary, we'll say adversary. So he is adversary instead of villain. The reason that had to come into being was because they couldn't make this a standalone film. I am one of those people that I did not know, or did not remember, I should say. I didn't remember this was part one.
Oh, did you not?
I did not. Oh. But because I did not see this opening day, I saw some stuff on Twitter, not reviews, but people just saying, hello, why is this not labeled as like part one? I was just like, oh, okay, so there's not they're really doing like a huge cliffhanger. So I knew going in because I've been warned that, but I feel like, it's a shame that they couldn't have not just made this movie more Spot focused and given that a final arc and then teased maybe this is what the third film is probably going to be about. But and like you say, the transition between was a little rough. And I feel like that's what could have made this film maybe under 2 hours and then saved the other stuff for a third movie, which is going to be Beyond the Spider-Verse?
Beyond the Spider-Verse, yeah.
So that's a little bit of a misgiving.
I knew about it being a part one going in.
Okay.
I was still disappointed that a lot of times, okay, when films, they decide to do a part one, part two.
Sure. Instead of just making a sequel to the third.
Right.
Yeah.
And I get that sometimes they leave on cliffhangers before they go to the part two. But normally the part one still have a relatively closed up story. And then there's just a open door to go to the next one.
That's what
This one
agreed.
doesn't do that. This one is not a full story. It isn't.
And at over
There's
two-
ways it could have
2
been made a
hours.
full story.
Yeah.
I agree with you. There's ways it could have been a full story and still been an open doorway to a part two. This one didn't make that decision. It truly is. By the time we see the second film, you put it all together, it's going to be one story that honestly was cut right in the middle at a true cliffhanger moment. And now, if we had to wait 2 to 3 years to see this next film, that would bother me a little more. Granted,
It's
it
supposedly
is
coming out 2024,
March,
right? Okay.
which is only 9 months away.
Okay.
It's not horrible, but still, I'm not a big fan of these whole part one, part two films. I agree with you. It's like make it a film and then just you make another sequel to the film. And you can have some little threads that kind of spread to the next film, but I still want to see a complete story. I still want to see a complete film.
And kind of like, let's just reference this. The Infinity War stuff. Those 2 films, you had Infinity War and then you had Endgame. That did span, but the way that was done, I think everybody had a knowledge it was going to be a 2-parter, but it's still, you can take that first one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a real downer ending.
Yeah, but it ended.
It's an ending.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the ending you wanted,
Right.
but it was an ending. And it's like, if they had stopped making movies after that point, you could say, but there was an ending. It
Right.
definitely ended.
Right. So I think that's what you and I were kind of talking about.
Yeah.
Not that we say you can't do things that span, but try to close things up so that it's not just making you feel a little cheated.
Yeah.
And something that worries me, but there again, I like this film. I like the first one. I trust that they have enough narrative gas in the tank to last for a whole third film.
think they do.
But I kind of feel like, in a way, they've kind of teased ahead. And I'm like, yeah, I feel like they could wrap this up in another 30 minutes. And then I feel like they'd just be spinning their wheels.
Yeah.
But I
Look, this
trust
is,
them.
there are different models and cases for films that have taken this approach. I think, some of them are very clear in saying part one in the title. So you've got the new Mission Impossible movie coming out this year where they've already said it's part one.
Don't give Tom Cruise any more press, Alan. He's
You
fine.
had the Harry Potter Deathly Hallows did a part one, part two.
Sure.
Dune was interesting in that Dune was marketed as Dune, but until you got into the movie, granted, at the very beginning of the movie, it flashed up on the screen, part one.
Right.
And I think a lot of people who did not know it was going to be a part one, that was a surprise. But at least you didn't get to the end of the film and expect it to be a complete film.
Right.
This is the closest to, which is interesting because it's kind of dealing with some similar subject matter, the way Back to the Future was handled. Back to the Future 1 was a complete standalone movie, but it left open door to say, oh, we could come back and explore this later.
Right.
Number 2, very similar. It did end abruptly. Like in number 2, if you recall, I don't know if you remember the way that Back to the Future 2 ended. But,
I
you know,
actually
they said
don't. I know what the
DeLorean-
third one was, but
yeah.
I can't remember.
The DeLorean blows up, gets hit by lightning, and disintegrates, and you don't know where Doc Brown goes, and
Okay.
Marty's left stranded in 1955 and all that. So it's like, it truly was a cliffhanger. And then they roll to a credit saying, oh, by the way, part 3 is coming like within a year.
Got you. Okay.
But that was still, that's the closest equivalent to this. It's like people not knowing it truly ends on a cliffhanger, and you're going to have to wait within 6 to 12 months to find out the resolution. I'm not a fan of it, but it'd be different. At least they're not telling us. I mean, Dune, there's like 3 years in between the two movies. This, at least, it's going to be a matter of more months instead of years. So, so be it.
Sure.
But it's good, fair warning for everybody also to understand. Don't expect this to be a complete story because it's not.
And I think that'll help your enjoyment too. If you already, I knew before I went in the movie, but then I was irritated at the way they did it. But still, I think it helps. It's kind of a fair warning. Be like, hey guys, this is part one. So
Yeah. That probably would have been helpful to see as well. But overall, I'm amazed by the artistry in this movie. I think the humor to drama balance was better even than the first movie. I felt the first movie at times there was a lot of humor. There's humor in both movies. I felt the humor and the drama balance was a little off on the first movie, where
like a little overbalanced with humor, maybe.
Yeah, and a little goofier. It was like they just threw in a lot more just random silly elements that were funny. This one, I mean, there's still a lot of humor, and they brought in a lot. But think about like in the opening 10 minutes, Gwen Stacy and her father, the scene that they have, which is really good.
Sure.
You've got some other moments. You got a lot of moments with Miles and his family. There are just a lot more dramatic moments, and I think it balanced the humor well. The humor was still there, and it was still very funny. But I like the balance in this one a little bit better. So it worked for me really well.
Since I've been saying misgivings or slight misgivings, even though overall I like the film, I will end on a positive note. And this is kind of a fan service thing. But I guess it's fan service, but it was done in a very kind of passing way. It wasn't distracting, and it was just like a slight little blip and then gone. But there's I'll say a multiversified cameo of a character that was in the previous film, played by a different actor, and he's shown imprisoned in a web cell. That was a fun touch. It's like a human actor in the midst of the animation. I'm not gonna say, but just that I thought that was cool.
Well, the movie did break a lot more boundaries.
It did.
And interconnecting with other forms of this character in media than even the previous one did.
Right.
Although it took me, I had to research a little bit. There was a moment, I don't know if you recall earlier in the film, Spot is learning that he can now pop into other dimensions, other multiverse universes. And he pops into one that is a live action world in a convenience store. Do you remember this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you know where that convenience store came from? Because I did not until I had to look it up afterwards. It's a real...
It comes from one of the previous Spider-Man movies, right? No?
Not really.
Okay.
A related film, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway, that's fine. I don't want to spoil it for anybody.
Right. I think I'd... Okay, if it's
it was a little deeper dive.
But a previous MCU film.
No.
This is an MCU. Okay, then no, I don't.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean, related, but no, it's a previous Sony type film. So I'll tell you.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, I remember what you're talking about, but obviously not the reference that I needed to pick up
and then
on.
there were some images we saw of other Spider-Man movies.
Right.
Those were all Sony movies.
Gotcha.
But we saw the Spider-Man character played by some of the actors. So yeah, they definitely played with more of that. I think they were a little looser with the branching out to other forms of the media than maybe even they were in the first movie. So I liked it. I thought it was good. It kind of gave a cohesive feeling to everything that they've been doing with this character as a whole. So yeah, it was good. So I think we're both high on this movie. Wishing it was a standalone movie that had its own thing, but had its own ending. But we also kind of knew that as on the outset. So we were, but it's good fair warning for anybody who's going to see this.
Be aware.
Understand. We really feel like you should see the Into the Spider-Verse movie, the first one, and secondly, understand this is a part one, and it very clearly is a part one. Now, will our opinion of this film change after we see the second one? Because obviously, you kind of have to then bridge it as one big story. We'll see. But overall, I think this is on its own merit. I thought very, very good movie.
Yeah, very enjoyable.
Okay. So that is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. It's doing pretty good business right now, so it'll probably be around for a little while. Rated PG. Again, with those caveats we mentioned of kind of things you need to know about before you go into this, we both recommend you guys check it out. It's a fun movie. It's interesting. It's good. All right, we're going to take a quick little break. When we come back, we've got some movie news to share. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with Foot Candle Films.
This podcast is sponsored by Jackson Creative, a custom communication agency located in downtown Hickory, North Carolina, specializing in online content creation. To learn more, visit thejacksoncreative.com. Jackson Creative, we tell your story.
Welcome back to Foot Candle Films here on themesh.tv. We had our review of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse before the break. Both Chris and I are very positive on that. But let's talk about some news, some movie news, Chris. There's a couple projects that I wanted to bring up of interest. Both of these stories have to do with directors, specifically directors that I think have some interesting things going on right now. One of these directors I did not know anything about, but I do know their family history and connection, which makes it kind of interesting. The other one, a little on the controversial side. We'll talk about him in a minute, but a director that's has been out of the business, possibly rightfully so for a while, but some things that may be happening with this individual as they try to get back into the filmmaking world. Anyway, did I tease those well enough for you?
Sure.
We're good to go? Okay. So, do you know Steven Spielberg? Are you aware of Steven Spielberg?
I've heard of him.
Okay.
Yes.
Director, he's made a few films.
Yes.
Most lately, he did the Fabelmans.
Yes.
Of course, Steven Spielberg, one of the best directors. I'm not saying from a subjective standpoint. I'm saying quantity and quality output. Yes, I think we can all say one of the best directors in the last 30, 40 years.
Sure.
He has a lot of children. I think he has a fair number of children. Kate Capshaw is his current wife, and I think they have children together.
Okay.
So I was kind of surprised when I was reading about some upcoming films that are on their way out, and some of them that are getting some attention at some other different big festivals. There's a film coming out called Don't Feed the Children. It stars Michelle Dockery, who you might know from Downton Abbey.
I am aware of the show, but still have never seen it.
Okay.
But okay.
The film also is just recently cast 3 young actors to its main cast.
Are they the children that are not supposed to be fed?
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah. And the film's about to start shooting, but the film is directed by a Destry Allen Spielberg. So it is a feature film debut and yes, this is the daughter of Steven Spielberg and Kate Capshaw. So this person, Destry, has been working on short films. So she's had a short film that did play some good festival circuits and got a lot of attention. So now getting to make a feature debut with Don't Feed the Children, I thought was very interesting. The storyline for the film is going to be that following the pandemic, a group of orphans head south in search of a new life, only to find themselves at the mercy of a deranged woman harboring a dangerous secret.
Whoa.
So it's somewhat of a thriller is the understanding. Of course, I know it's early at this point. We don't know where everything's going to go with the film, but it does seem to be kind of in that direction. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up because I think that's interesting. I did not know Steven Spielberg had a offspring that was already in the directing field. That was kind of
I was not aware of that either.
Yeah.
Huh.
But I think exciting to see. I'm always curious when you have a really strong, well-known director, and then you see what their children are able to do.
Sure.
I think it's great.
What's the release for it? Oh, we don't know that yet.
It's still under production right now.
Oh, it's still under production,
yeah,
right?
They just started filming and all. So I'm looking back to see if there's anything else about this that I thought was of note to share. But I
wonder, with that premise, you could see it maybe being, it could either be a thriller or it could be like a kind of like a spin on like Escape from Witch Mountain or something where the 3 kids are banding together. It could be told as kind of like in the vein of early Spielberg, kind of like an E.T. type thing, like a family type film, or it could be really dark and be a thriller.
Yeah.
So, it'll be curious to see what role she takes. Like what kind of genre does she go down? Does she do kind of like a heartwarming, children bonding together and they find a family or something? Or no, this is like dark. So it'll be interesting to see.
So from a directing standpoint, she's directed 2 short films.
Okay.
Let Me Go the Right Way is the one that got a lot of attention. I think got her kind of on the map. So that was a short film that came out in 2022. She'd also done a film before that called Rosie, another short. So now she's got Please Don't Feed the Children. And then she has also got another film in development as a director, which I think this is kind of funny. It is currently titled, Four Assassins, parentheses, and a Funeral. So kind of playing off the
So
four.
maybe seeming to go to the whole comedy route, maybe?
I don't know.
Or
Yeah.
lighter route, maybe?
Could be. Now, she's also an actress.
Okay.
So she was actually, she started a couple of her own short films, but she did have a supporting role in Licorice Pizza as one of the younger women in the film. I don't know. Her character's name was Frisbee Cahill. I don't recall the film, which character that was.
Right,
So,
sure.
Anyway. But yeah, so we actually have a Destry Allen Spielberg who is going to be entering feature film world alongside her father, Stephen. I think it's exciting.
Yeah,
it's kind of fun. I'm always curious to see what the films turn out to be like. I mean, we've had a little bit of that happening with Cronenberg lately, with his son kind of being in the film world. Who is it? The Ghostbusters.
Reitman.
Oh yeah, Ivan Reitman. Then his son, now Jason Reitman, kind of taking on the reins for that too. It's always, again, it's interesting and fun to see where this next generation go with.
I'm going to have to scour the internet and see if I can find her 2 short films because I'd like to see those.
Agreed. So that's one story I wanted to kind of bring up. I just thought of interest that I wasn't aware of. The other one, all right, and this is maybe a little touchy news item.
Okay.
Chris, and I want to try to handle this correctly because it's about Bryan Singer. Okay. You remember Bryan Singer, the director.
Did some X-Men movies
He was the one who started the X-Men franchise. He did.
before the MCU.
That's right.
Right.
Did the film Apt Pupil. He did the film Valkyrie with Tom Cruise.
Okay.
He did. And The Usual Suspects was like the big movie that brought him
And that
on the
was
scene.
That was
like,
before X-Men, right?
Oh yeah. That was
Okay.
like his first big movie. I think it was his second film, but that was the one that got him all the attention.
And he was, correct me if I'm wrong, he was the one that kind of directed Bohemian Rhapsody and then was taken off it.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. And
So
that was kind of what made him disappear.
So Bohemian Rhapsody, he was the original director of that film. Supposedly halfway through, he basically got fired because he was absent quite a bit, according to the studio. There was a, quote, erratic behavior on set with crew and with people. So they fired him, replaced him with Dexter Fletcher, who finished making the film. Now, Dexter Fletcher also, within the next year, made the film Rocket Man, which is just, to me, that's just also interesting. I think Rocket Man is far superior a film from a musical biopic film than Bohemian Rhapsody is. But yet, it's just odd that Bohemian Rhapsody was kind of
Got all the attention.
but also was a split movie between two directorial. We don't know which director, kind of won in the end, where most of the stuff was coming from. I always find that so fascinating.
Sure.
But now, since he got fired, there have been allegations brought up against the singer against Bryan Singer for sexual assault against underage men and that he had relations with, supposedly. A lot of that came up. Singer has denied all of that all this time. Some of the studio heads at one point stood by Singer, kind of supporting him, but then and tried to help him get back into making films, but they just couldn't find any distributors that really wanted to touch Bryan Singer at that point, so they kind of let it all drop.
Gotcha.
So really, he has moved to Israel, is my understanding of what I'm reading. This is all according to a Variety article talking about Bryan Singer right now. But they are saying that he is in the midst of trying to build back up some filmmaking work. And again, I say all this, look, if he's guilty of the things he was accused of, I don't want him making films. He doesn't need to be entering that world. If he's not, and I'm going to get to here in a second, he is trying to do a project that's hoping to exonerate him to some degree. And if that's true, and if those exonerations are true, then obviously I hope he has a chance to build back up. So we'll see with this. That's why I say this is all very touchy.
So his next project is one that's kind of a defense of...
That is a project coming up. It's a documentary, a self-financed documentary about himself.
Wow.
Yeah. That That's interesting. It's a documentary about himself and his struggles. One source who was approached about the project said that the pitch was impressive and that Singer plans to address the allegations of sexual misdeeds and cover his attempt at career resurrection.
Yeah, it's either that is a really interesting thing. Wow, that's bizarre. It's kind of like I'm going to self-finance something to prove that. Yeah, wow.
Yeah. He's also working on 3 narrative features that are set in and around Israel, because that's where he's been living in recent years. He's working without an agent, meeting with investors about backing the films. They would all be fairly low budget, like $10 million a piece, which means it's a lot of money, but
sure,
low budget for what he's compared to doing. And he's got some producers lined up to help him out to try to make those films. But the documentary would be a self-financed documentary that...
And he's financing it. Obviously, he's the subject of it. Is he also the director of it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's making it. That's the understanding. He's doing it about himself. Which has there been a documentary where the director made the documentary about a subject for themselves?
I don't recall any offhand. Seems like usually, there's biopics, which wouldn't be that case, but then documentaries directed by themselves. None come to mind.
I can't think of one. There may be one out there, I'm sure, but I can't think of one offhand that would be like that.
No, and especially one that is really good. I'm sure there have been. We're just not, but like a really good example of this, like a people respect the film. I can't think of any offhand. So that is interesting. I see. It is, kind of tough subject matter, but it is a very interesting thing.
Well, the thing
see
is, he's never so tough. He's never faced criminal charges for any of these things that have happened.
I mean,
And that's not to say it didn't happen. I'm saying we don't know.
Right.
Yeah, obviously, if he's guilty of the crimes that he's been accused of, and those things happen, then absolutely, that's no good, and I don't need to see him any film project from him.
Right.
But him making a documentary to kind of exonerate himself, I think it's a fascinating concept. Just whether it's warranted, whether it works or not, I don't know. So anyway, Bryan Singer's an interesting case for me because I here's someone who. He was never a director that just, never got the awards, never made like masterpiece films. But he did, if you look back, the X-Men films, those first X-Men films he did, kind of set the path for what we've got today. I mean, I think honestly, if those didn't exist, I don't know if the superhero landscape that has dominated the box office for the last 10 years would be as strong. And Usual Suspects was a really, really good movie.
It was.
But is a shame to see him kind of spiral out of control as a director and losing projects. It's very disturbing if the allegations about him and his sexual assault issues are true. Obviously, that's a real problem. But we'll just have to wait and see. The public opinion, court of public opinion, I think is probably going to be open on this here pretty soon, especially if he does get this documentary made and gets it out for people to see. It's just going to be very interesting. Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the news items I had. Again, news is a little slow these days. There's not a whole lot of information. We're like in the thick of the summer. The summer season, the big blockbusters are rolling out. We don't really hear a lot about films that will be coming out later in the year quite yet. That will be happening soon. But I know we are expecting quite a good number of films to come out by the end of the year that I'm looking forward to. But light on the news side, but that's what we've got. So you got anything?
No, I do not.
We're all good. Well, that was what we wanted to talk about here. We're trying to do these episodes a little shorter, just kind of hit a main review and then kind of talk a little bit about some other things happening in the movie world. So that is what we've got for you today. And go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to say, if you are aware of some movie news that you would like for us to share on the show, send us an email to info@footcandle.org and let us know, hey, next episode, why don't you talk about this news item? And we'll research it and try to talk about it. Yeah. Also, you can follow us on Twitter @footcandlefilm. Al and I are both on Letterboxd, where we try to track what we're seeing. Give us a star rating, write a review, share with friends on whatever service you receive your favorite podcasts on. It'll help us reach new listeners. We appreciate it. And I will throw in a plug for the 2023 Foot Candle Film Festival, which is happening September 15th through the 24th. We'll be in Hickory, Western North Carolina, so if you're in the area, we'd love to have you come visit us.
All right, that sounds good. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this week's episode. We will be back next week with another episode, another review. So look forward to that. And in the meantime, we will just plan to talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.
See you in the ticket line.
Watch films in the company of like-minded people in the dark. Watch films in the underground. We won't let anyone know where you are. The films that don't make it to Carmike at the mall, or ones that were famous when Grandpa would watch films out of the reverence of the heritage of an art. Watch films through the courtesy of Foot Candle Film Society.
Special thanks to Carpal Tuller for the show theme music. For more about Carpal Tuller, visit www.carpaltuller.com. You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard. You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.